Hi everyone, and welcome to Module 4. The good news is you're officially halfway through the course, so congratulations. That's no small feat. In this module, we're going to be considering quantitative methodologies, and for some of you, this is very comfortable territory. For others, it definitely isn't, and I fit in the second category, I'm afraid. However, I'm happy to say that the readings in this module will add to your understanding of quantitative research, and they certainly have mine, and enable us to be more knowledgeable consumers of quantitative research. So in Module 4, you will be reading Creswell and Guterman, who consider collecting quantitative data in Chapter 5, and then explore analyzing and interpreting data in Chapter 6. Gerard gives us an example of how one might go about thinking through the key concepts in the analysis of survey data. So all of these readings together are going to be very helpful in thinking through what do we mean by quantitative analysis? How is it that we can think that through? And whether we do this kind of research or not, this is the kind of research that we encounter often in our professional work as we look at various issues that may arise in educational settings. You may encounter it as well in readings that you're collecting for your literature review, for people who are doing, for example, mixed methods, who use both quantitative and qualitative data. So it's a very important part of your research repertoire, shall we say. In terms of the assignments for Module 4, there will only be one, the Forum for Assignment Group. So I suppose that's the second piece of good news. As usual, you will have a question to respond to in the forum with the expectation that you will draw from the literature in both your initial response and responses of your colleagues. In planning for upcoming assignments in Modules 5 and 6, as there are no assignments other than the forum in this module, I'd suggest that you may want to get a bit of a leap ahead on the annotated bibliography and synthesis that you're going to be responsible for by the end of Module 5. There's no need to think about the assignment in Module 6 yet, but the annotated bibliography and synthesis is an important assignment that you'll be doing, as I mentioned, in Module 5. It's somewhat time-consuming to complete both parts, so getting a bit of a head start will help. So if you choose to do that, then I applaud you, because it might be tempting to take a little bit of a break, and maybe that's the most important thing at this point. You can certainly make that decision, but just a little bit of a heads up if you have the opportunity to do that. It will probably give you a little bit of a break later on. Okay, so let's think about what is quantitative research. Well, we already know quite a bit from Creswell and Guterman, as well as some of its philosophical underpinnings from Guba and Lincoln. We've learned that it is systematic, as is any kind of research, but it is organized in a particular way and provides a highly systematic approach to the gathering and analysis of data. 2, it is empirical. That is, it is based on observable phenomena. So we're talking about social phenomena only as they can be demonstrated by what can be seen and quantified. 3, because it depends on quantifiable data in its analysis, researchers use statistical, mathematical, or computational techniques or methods, which your readings will discuss. 4, it also begins with an hypothesis that is either confirmed or disconfirmed in the research process. As we've learned, this is a different approach to qualitative research, in that qualitative research either comes to a hypothesis, as in grounded theory, or more generally, its goal is understanding a question that has been raised, and the research helps us to understand it. But it cannot be confirmed in the same way that quantitative research is able to do. It does other kinds of things for us in understanding particular phenomena that we encounter in our professional work and so on, but it can't be confirmed in the same way. And I've talked about that earlier in the Guba and Lincoln article. 5, it is objective in the sense that the researcher tries through various strategies to separate him or herself from the process in which they are engaged. Arguably, this is always an incomplete process. And when I say arguably, I base that on a large literature that talks about the whole notion of objectivity and whether in fact it is ever possible. But certainly, as much as possible, quantitative analysis uses accepted strategies, blind studies, and so on, so that the researcher can attempt to separate themselves from the phenomenon under examination as much as possible. For example, Creswell and Guterman talk about developing questions for surveys and so on. And some would take those as very objective because you can quantify the answers and you can come to a conclusion from that. But others would argue that such a process can never be entirely removed from the beliefs and values of the researcher or the research team or the funder or what have you in putting together that survey. So we see that, for example, in political surveys and that sort of thing. So while objectivity is the goal, and many strategies enable objective practices, it is arguably never absolute. So I'm not saying that it's not objective, but it may not be absolutely objective in the same kind of way when we're talking about social phenomena. It examines relationships between variables, and I'll be talking about that more in a minute. So what is quantitative research and how does it help us understand social phenomena? Well, all of these characteristics of quantitative research are what it is, and also how it helps us to understand various phenomena in education and other social contexts with some clarity and certainty in particular kinds of ways. So as you'll be asked in your forum this week, you'll be asked to think about what are the differences between descriptive and inferential statistics that are actually key tools in quantitative research. So I'd like to look at a video that will introduce us to both, and I'm going to play that video now.
Hello and welcome to the first statistics lecture. Because this is the first lecture, we're going to be starting off with some of the most basic concepts, and right now I'm going to teach you about descriptive and inferential statistics. So first of all, what is statistics? Well, statistics is the science of collecting, organizing, and analyzing data. Data being facts or pieces of information. Now I'm going to give you 3 examples of data, like the ages of students in your statistics class, or the genders of the last 8 people to walk by, or even 5 randomly measured IQ scores. Basically, any information you can collect is data, and then you'll eventually do math with that or something. So when people talk about statistics, they're usually talking about 2 main divisions. There's descriptive statistics and inferential statistics. Descriptive statistics consist of organizing and summarizing data, while inferential statistics consist of using the data you've measured to form conclusions, usually about other data. Now I'm going to give you an example of these 2 things. So let's say there are 20 statistics classes at your university, and you've collected the ages of the students in one class. And right below I have, 15 ages that you have hypothetically collected from different people in your class. A descriptive question that could be asked about this data is, what's the most common age of student in your statistics class? Which, in this case would be 18 because you have the most 18s out of everything. And an inferential question that could be asked about this data is, are the ages of the students in this classroom similar to what you would expect in a normal statistics class at this university? See that the first one is just asking us to describe data, while the second one is asking an additional question about that data. Now, the data you get will be drawn from either populations or samples, usually samples, but I'm going to explain both. Now, the population is the group that you're interested in studying, and the sample is a subset of that population. Basically, your sample comes from the population, as shown in the diagram below. So, let's say you want to find the average GPA of a student at your university. Your university has 20,000 students, and you randomly select 100 of them and ask them what their GPA is. In this case, the group that you're interested in studying, your population, is that 20,000 students, and your sample is that smaller group of 100 students that you've taken from the population. And for the first video, that's all I really want to talk about. I want you to have a strong idea of what statistics is and, a vague idea of what data is. Know the difference between descriptive and inferential statistics, and know the difference between populations and samples, but also how they relate to one another. Basically, that samples come from populations.
Okay, so now we have a basic understanding of some of the terminology in statistical analysis.
Hello, and welcome to the first.
So let's look at this in a simple study I conducted several years ago in Alberta. I was on the Gender and Diversity Committee with the ATA, and we had become interested in exploring a persistent question in education. How can we better understand the gender disparities in the teaching profession? So we have, often, always actually, many more women than men that are teachers within the larger population of teachers. We did an extensive literature review and found that the issue was highly complex and the statistics remained remarkably stable. Somewhere around 70 to 80% women and 20 to 30% men, and that had been the case in Alberta for many, many years. Went up and down depending on the economy mostly, but generally speaking, I shouldn't even say generally, always the statistics stayed within those particular parameters. So I want to add a caveat here that in this study we are talking about male presenting and female presenting teachers, and we did not account for alternative gender representation, so I just wanted to make that clear. However, my study took as its population beginning teachers, and those beginning teachers were found at a conference that was held every year for beginning teachers, and so that was the general population, that was the population of our study. The samples were the female and the male teachers within that particular larger population. Creswell makes the statement that when you are comparing two populations or more, that it becomes by necessity inferential. So I'll take him at his word, and certainly I was able to make inferences by looking at variables in relation to the two samples in this study. So using my descriptive data about males and females in teaching in Alberta, for example, I was able to ask the question, how does my population compare to the general population of teachers overall in Alberta in terms of the percentages of males and females in the wider teaching community? So in this particular population, which was a large sample of the actual teachers that, beginning teachers that were at the conference, so, I could be pretty and I should say that I had a helper with this entire project who was well versed in the whole area of statistics and often, always worked in this area of quantitative analysis. So in our population, we had 64 males and we had 277 females for a total of 341. The percentages then were 19% male and 81% female. So as you can see, very close to the general kinds of populations of male and female teachers that you find in Alberta generally. In thinking about this study, then, my larger question was, why are there more female than male teachers in Alberta? And I chose to tease out some of the aspects of this question through various variables, the variables that is, using a survey in which respondents answered several questions about aspects of that larger questions. So one of the questions that we asked was around the career, or several of the questions actually, looked at the career trajectory of male and female teachers in Alberta. Remembering that our population was beginning teachers in Alberta, our samples were the male beginning teachers, female beginning teachers, and our hypothesis was that males enter teaching at different life stages than females, and this may, in fact, give us a reason for the differences in the statistics. So let's look at one of the hypotheses around when a choice was made to become a teacher, in which we asked when participants in the population chose to become a teacher and then distributed them by gender. So we asked about various times in their school career, because that was something that was shared by all of them, when they began to think about being a teacher. So you will notice that there's a really significant gender distribution at the elementary school level. So a lot of female teachers that were in this particular sample decided that they were going to become teachers when they were in elementary school. Very, very few of male teachers did. In secondary school, interestingly, because so many, I suppose, male or female teachers had already made that decision, the numbers are about even, but even then there's a slightly smaller population of males than females at the secondary level. At the undergraduate level, many more males than females decided. And then we had this other category, which was interesting, and we pursued further, asking questions about if they didn't decide before they graduated, when did they decide in terms of their follow-up career. And there was some interesting gender information that came out of that. I won't get into that, but this is just illustrative of the various kinds of things that were talked about in the readings, as well as in the video that we just watched. So one of the questions you may be left with is, well, then what if I know nothing about statistics? As I've said, I certainly fall in that category. I didn't take a course in statistics in my undergrad, and I took a very bad course during my PhD studies, but I feel that I need at least a general awareness of the processes, the methods used in quantitative research, and certainly the methodological positioning around quantitative analysis. And this module's readings help me, and I hope help you with that. I need to know some of the most common terms so that I can read a quantitative study and at least understand it enough to make a judgment about its validity so that I can become a knowledgeable consumer of research, even though I'll never do a quantitative research study myself probably. And I need to know that because it is necessary as a researcher and often as a professional educator as well, since so many policy changes and discussions about education are premised on quantitative studies. And even if your knowledge is limited, it's important to know about and use reliable sources so that you can read a study and trust its conclusions, even if you don't read the whole method section of the paper, which I have to admit sometimes I don't. But I do make sure that it's a reputable journal that I'm looking at, or it's a reputable source, and that it's a writer of substance whose writing I can trust. So I hope that this is helpful to you, whether you use quantitative or qualitative analysis. As I've said, this is an important quiver in your repertoire as a researcher, and so I hope that this will be helpful to you as well. Take care.